When 16-year-old Catherine Mayfield is offered to Comanche Chief Running Wolf as a bride to end a brutal frontier war in 1847 Texas, she expects to become a prisoner of duty, but discovers instead a man who sees her not as a prize to be claimed, but as a bridge between two worlds at war. As Catherine finds herself torn between the safety of her past and a love that could reshape the future of both peoples, she must answer the question that will determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she holds dear. Can the heart truly choose its own territory, even when that choice could destroy everything she's ever known? The sound of boots marching made Catherine jump. She pressed her face against the cold window glass in her father's office at Fort Clearwater, Texas. The year was 1847, and autumn had painted the plains gold and red. Below, in the dusty courtyard, 20 soldiers moved like one person, their rifles catching the morning sun. 17 dead this month. Her father's deep voice cut through the room like a knife. The Comanche are getting bolder. Catherine's hands shook as she traced patterns in the fog her breath made on the glass. She had heard this talk before. Every week brought news of another ranch burned, another family killed. The war between her people and the Comanche seemed to grow worse each day. "There has to be another way, Colonel Mayfield," said a voice she didn't know. Catherine turned slightly to see a thin man in dusty clothes sitting across from her father's big wooden desk. His hat sat in his lap, and worry lines creased his face. "Mr. Holbrook, I've tried everything," her father said, rubbing his tired eyes. "We've offered them cattle, horses, even gold. Nothing works. They want something else." Catherine's heart started beating faster. Something in her father's voice scared her. She had never heard him sound so helpless, not even when her mother died of fever 3 years ago. "What do they want?" Captain Morrison asked. He stood near the door, his hand resting on his gun belt. Catherine had known him since she was small. He always brought her candy when he visited, but today his kind face looked worried. Mr. Holbrook cleared his throat. "Chief Running Wolf says he will stop the raids if we give him a bride. A white woman from the fort. He says it will show our people trust his people." The room went quiet. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Outside, a hawk cried as it flew over the fort walls. "Absolutely not," her father said, his fist hitting the desk so hard that papers jumped. "I won't sacrifice an innocent woman to save my own skin." "Colonel, please listen," Mr. Holbrook said, leaning forward. "This isn't about sacrifice. The chief is educated. He learned English from missionaries. He's not the wild savage people think he is." Catherine bit her lip. She had seen Comanche warriors from far away when they came to trade. They looked fierce and proud, nothing like the gentle men she knew at the fort. The thought of marrying one made her stomach feel sick. "There are 7 unmarried women here," Captain Morrison said quietly. "The Miller girl, the preacher's daughter, young Mrs. Watson who just lost her husband, and my Catherine," her father finished, his voice breaking. Catherine's world tilted. She gripped the windowsill so hard her knuckles turned white. They were talking about her like she wasn't even there, like she was a horse they might trade. "She's only 16, her father continued. "Just a child. Old enough to marry by law," Mr. Holbrook said. "And Colonel, she's your daughter. If you offer her, it shows the chief how much you want peace. It would mean more than any other woman." Catherine wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but her feet felt stuck to the floor. She thought about Mary Patterson, who had married last spring. Mary had worn her grandmother's white dress and flowers in her hair. She had smiled and laughed and looked so happy. This would be nothing like that. "I need time to think," her father said. "Time is what we don't have," Captain Morrison replied. 3 more homesteads were hit last week. The Anderson family barely escaped with their lives. If this continues, we'll have a full war on our hands. Catherine closed her eyes and tried to imagine what a Comanche camp looked like. Did they live in houses? Did they have books? Would they hurt her? The questions swirled in her mind like leaves in a storm. "What exactly did the chief say?" her father asked. Mr. Holbrook pulled out a folded paper. He said, "Give me a woman of your people to be my wife, and I will give you peace." This will show that your hearts are true, and that you see my people as more than enemies." "He could be lying," Captain Morrison said. "This could be a trap. Or it could be our only chance," Mr. Holbrook replied. "Colonel, I've met with Chief Running Wolf 3 times. He keeps his word. If he says he'll stop the raids, he will." Catherine turned around to face the 3 men. Her father looked older than his 42 years, his brown hair showing more gray than she remembered. The weight of commanding the fort and protecting everyone inside it had worn him down. "What if I said yes?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. All 3 men stared at her. Her father's face went pale. "Catherine, you don't understand what you're saying," he said, standing up so fast his chair fell over. "I understand that people are dying," she said, finding her courage. "I understand that you're all scared. Maybe I should be scared too, but I'm not. I'm angry." "Angry?" Captain Morrison asked. "Angry that we're fighting over land that's big enough for everyone. Angry that children are growing up afraid. Angry that my father looks like he hasn't slept in months because he's trying to keep us all safe." Her father walked over and put his hands on her shoulders. "Sweet girl, you don't know what you'd be giving up. Your whole life, your future, everything you've dreamed of." Catherine looked into his eyes, the same green eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. "What if my dreams are smaller than I thought? What if there's something bigger I'm supposed to do?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "You cannot be serious." The words exploded from Catherine's mouth before she could stop them. She stood in the middle of her father's office, her hands balled into fists, facing the 3 men who had just decided her future without asking her opinion. 3 days had passed since their first conversation. 3 days of whispered meetings, of her father pacing the floor at night, of soldiers looking at her with pity in their eyes. Now they had made their choice. "Catherine, please sit down," her father said, but his voice shook. Colonel James Mayfield had led men into battle, had made life and death decisions for years, but asking his only daughter to marry a Comanche chief was breaking him apart. "I will not sit down," she said, her voice getting stronger. "You're talking about my life like I'm a piece of furniture you can move around." Mr. Holbrook shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Miss Mayfield, I understand this is difficult, but do you?" Catherine spun to face him. "Do you understand what it's like to have 3 grown men decide who you'll marry without asking what you want? Do you have a daughter, Mr. Holbrook?" The agent's face turned red. "I do, as a matter of fact. 2 daughters. And would you trade them to strangers to solve your problems?" "That's not what this is," Captain Morrison said gently. He had always been kind to her, like a favorite uncle. "This is about saving lives, Catherine. Both our people and theirs." Catherine walked to the window again, but this time she didn't look out. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the glass. Her brown hair was braided simply, the way her mother had taught her. Her green eyes looked too big in her thin face. She wore a blue dress that her mother had sewn before she died, one of the few pretty things Catherine owned. "Tell me about him," she said quietly. The men exchanged glances. "About who?" her father asked. "About Chief Running Wolf. If I'm going to marry him, I should know something about the man." Mr. Holbrook cleared his throat. "He's young for a chief, maybe 28 or 30. He became leader when his father died in a hunting accident 2 years ago. Before that, he spent time with Father Martinez at the mission near San Antonio." "He can read?" Catherine asked, surprised. "Better than most white men," Mr. Holbrook said. "Speaks English, Spanish, and 3 different Indian languages. He's smart, Miss Mayfield. Some say too smart for his own good." Catherine felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as terrible as she imagined. "What does he look like?" "Tall, strong. Has long black hair that he wears loose or braided. Usually wears traditional Comanche clothes, but I've seen him in white man's clothes too when he comes to trade." Is he cruel?" The question came out smaller than she meant it to. Captain Morrison answered this time. "I fought against him twice, Catherine. He's a fierce warrior, but he follows rules of honor. He doesn't kill women or children. He's never broken a promise that I know of. That's supposed to make me feel better? Catherine laughed, but it sounded more like crying. Her father stood up and walked over to her. Catherine, if you say no, I'll find another way. I won't force you to do this. She looked up at him, seeing the pain in his eyes. What other way, Papa? You said yourself that you've tried everything else. I'll take more soldiers from San Antonio. We'll fight them if we have to. And how many will die? Catherine asked. How many of our people? How many of theirs? Her father had no answer. Catherine turned back to the window, watching the afternoon sun paint the fort walls gold. In a few hours, the sun would set, and another day would end. Tomorrow, more people might die if they didn't act. When would I have to go? She asked. Catherine, no, her father said. When? She repeated. Mr. Holbrook answered reluctantly. The chief said he would wait 1 week for an answer. That was 4 days ago. So, 3 days from now. 3 days. Catherine tried to imagine what 3 days would feel like if she knew they were her last days as Catherine Mayfield of Fort Clearwater, Texas. Her last days sleeping in her own bed, eating at her father's table, wearing her mother's dresses. What happens during the ceremony? She asked, her cheeks burning red. It's simple, Mr. Holbrook said. The chief will meet us at Adobe Wells, the trading post halfway between here and his camp. There will be witnesses from both sides. You'll exchange vows according to both traditions. And then you'll go with him to his camp. You'll be his wife and part of his tribe. The words hit Catherine like stones. Wife, tribe. She would belong to people she had never met, following customs she didn't understand. Could I ever come back? She whispered. The silence stretched out like a rope pulled tight. I don't know, her father finally said. Probably not. Catherine closed her eyes and tried to imagine her mother's face. Margaret Mayfield had been brave, everyone said so. When the fever had taken her, she had faced death without fear, more worried about her husband and daughter than herself. What would Mama do? Catherine asked. Her father's voice broke. Your mother would do whatever she thought was right, even if it scared her to death. Catherine nodded. She understood now. Being brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant being scared and doing the right thing anyway. I need to think, she said. Of course, her father said. Take all the time you need. But they all knew she didn't have much time at all. 3 days to decide whether to leave everything she had ever known. 3 days to choose between her own happiness and the lives of people she might never meet. As the sun set outside the window, Catherine made a decision that would change everything. But first, she had questions that needed answers, and she knew exactly who to ask. The wagon wheels creaked like old bones as they rolled across the endless Texas plains. Catherine sat stiff as a board on the hard wooden seat, her small traveling bag clutched in her lap like a shield. Every bump in the dirt road sent sharp pains up her spine, but she refused to complain. Easy there, Miss Catherine, said Joe Martinez, the wagon driver. His weathered hands held the reins steady as the 2 horses plodded forward. We got a long way to go yet. Catherine nodded but didn't speak. 3 days had passed since she told her father yes. 3 days of packing her few belongings, of saying goodbye to friends who looked at her like she was already dead, of trying not to think about what waited for her at the end of this journey. Captain Morrison rode his brown horse beside the wagon, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. How much farther to Adobe Wells? He called to Joe. Maybe 2 hours if we keep this pace, Joe replied. Should get there before the sun starts going down. Catherine's stomach twisted. In 2 hours, she would meet the man who would become her husband. The man who would take her away from everything she had ever known. Behind them, dust clouds marked where 6 more soldiers followed. Her father had wanted to send 20 men, but Captain Morrison had talked him out of it. Too many soldiers will look like we're planning to fight, he had said. We want to show trust, not fear. Trust. Catherine almost laughed. She was riding toward a Comanche camp to marry a chief she had never seen, and everyone wanted to talk about trust. Tell me about Adobe Wells, she said to Joe, mainly to stop her mind from spinning in circles. Not much to tell, Joe said, spitting tobacco juice over the side of the wagon. Just a trading post run by old Pete Sullivan. He sells supplies to anyone with money, white folks, Indians, Mexicans, doesn't matter to him. Kind of a neutral place, you might say. Is it safe? Catherine asked. Captain Morrison answered this time. Safer than most places out here. Both sides respect it as neutral ground. Pete's got a reputation for being fair and honest. The wagon hit a deep rut, and Catherine had to grab the side to keep from falling off. Her blue traveling dress, the nicest one she owned, was already covered in dust. Her hair, which she had spent an hour braiding that morning, felt like straw. Miss Catherine, Captain Morrison said, riding closer. I want you to know something. If you change your mind even after we get there, just say the word. We'll take you home. No questions asked. Catherine looked at his kind face, seeing the worry in his gray eyes. And then what, Captain? We go back to fighting? More people die. Maybe. Or maybe we find another way. You've been looking for another way for months, Catherine said. This is the only chance we have. As they rode on, Catherine found herself studying the landscape around them. She had never been this far from the fort before. The plains stretched out like a golden ocean, broken only by small hills and clusters of scrub oak trees. In the distance, she could see dark shapes that might have been buffalo. Everything felt bigger out here. The sky seemed to go on forever, painted blue and white with scattered clouds. The wind carried scents she didn't recognize: wild grass, sage, something that might have been flowers. It's beautiful, she said, surprising herself. Joe nodded. That it is, miss. Dangerous too, but beautiful. Takes a special kind of person to love this land. What kind of person? Catherine asked. Someone who ain't afraid of being small, Joe said. This country makes you feel tiny, like you're just a speck under all that sky. Some folks can't handle that feeling. Makes them want to hide or run away. Catherine understood what he meant. She did feel small out here, but not in a bad way. She felt like she was part of something much bigger than herself. There, Captain Morrison pointed ahead. Adobe Wells. Catherine shaded her eyes with her hand and looked where he was pointing. In the distance, she could see a low building made of brown mud bricks, with smoke rising from a chimney. Several horses were tied to a rail in front, and she could see people moving around. Her heart started beating faster. Are they already here? Looks like it, Captain Morrison said. I can see at least a dozen horses. Probably some of Running Wolf's men. As they got closer, Catherine could make out more details. The trading post was bigger than she had expected, with several smaller buildings scattered around it. She could see white men and Indians talking together near the horses, their voices carrying on the wind. Remember, Captain Morrison said quietly, you don't have to go through with this. Just say the word. But Catherine barely heard him. Her attention was fixed on a man standing apart from the others, his back to the approaching wagon. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with long black hair that moved in the breeze. Even from a distance, she could tell this wasn't just any warrior. Is that him? She whispered. That's Chief Running Wolf, Joe confirmed. The man turned as their wagon approached, and Catherine got her first clear look at the person who would change her life forever. He was younger than she had expected, with a strong jaw and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore traditional Comanche clothes, leather pants and shirt decorated with beads and feathers, but he stood with the confidence of someone comfortable in any world. Their eyes met across the dusty yard, and Catherine felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not excitement, but curiosity. This man didn't look like the savage monster from the stories she had heard. He looked like someone with thoughts and feelings, someone who might understand what it felt like to carry the weight of other people's lives. The wagon rolled to a stop 20 feet away from the group of waiting men. Catherine's hands shook as she smoothed her skirt and tried to look dignified despite the dust and heat. Well, Captain Morrison said, dismounting from his horse. Here we are. Running Wolf walked toward them with easy, confident steps. When he spoke, his voice was deep and clear, with only a slight accent. Captain Morrison, he said, nodding politely. Thank you for coming. Chief Running Wolf, Morrison replied. I hope we can finish this business peacefully. Running Wolf's dark eyes moved to Catherine, still sitting in the wagon. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Catherine felt like he was trying to read her thoughts, to understand who she really was beneath her fear and uncertainty. Miss Catherine Mayfield, he said finally. I am honored to meet you. Catherine opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. Everything she had planned to say disappeared like smoke. You're staring at me like I might bite, Running Wolf said with a slight smile that surprised Catherine completely. She had expected many things from this first meeting, but humor wasn't one of them. They sat across from each other at a rough wooden table inside Pete Sullivan's trading post. The air smelled of leather, coffee, and tobacco smoke. Other men, both white and Comanche, filled the room, but their voices had dropped to whispers as they watched the historic meeting unfold. I wasn't staring, Catherine said, then immediately felt foolish because she obviously had been staring. It's all right, Running Wolf said. I was staring too. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Catherine asked, finding her voice. Someone older. Someone who looked angry or scared. He tilted his head slightly. You look curious. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Should I be scared? That depends, Running Wolf said. Are you here because you want to be? Or because someone made you come? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Around the room, conversations had stopped completely. Even Pete Sullivan, the owner of the trading post, had stopped wiping down glasses behind his makeshift bar. Both, Catherine answered honestly. I came because my father needed me to come. But I stayed in the wagon because I wanted to see what would happen. Running Wolf leaned back in his chair, studying her face. That's an interesting answer. Most people would have said one or the other. Most people probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, Catherine replied. This time Running Wolf's smile was bigger, showing white teeth. No, they probably wouldn't. Captain Morrison coughed loudly from the next table. Perhaps we should discuss the terms of the agreement. What terms? Catherine asked, looking between the two men. Running Wolf answered. The captain wants to make sure I understand that you're not a prisoner, that you can leave if you want to. Can I? Catherine asked. Yes, Running Wolf said simply. But I hope you won't want to. Something in his voice made Catherine look at him more closely. She had expected a fierce warrior, someone who took what he wanted without caring about anyone else's feelings. Instead, she saw a young man who seemed genuinely interested in what she thought and felt. Why did you ask for a wife? She asked. Why not just gold or cattle like before? Running Wolf was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. Because gold and cattle don't build trust between people. Marriage creates family. Family creates understanding. But you don't know me, Catherine said. I could be terrible. I could be mean or lazy or stupid. Could you? Running Wolf asked, his eyes twinkling. Are you any of those things? I don't think so, Catherine said. But I might be stubborn. Good, Running Wolf said. Stubborn people don't give up easily. I like that. Pete Sullivan brought over 2 cups of coffee and set them on the table. Excuse me for interrupting, he said. But I've been listening to you two talk, and I got to say something. What's that, Pete? Captain Morrison asked. I've been running this trading post for 15 years, Pete said, his grizzled face serious. I've seen white folks and Indians try to make peace before. Usually ends in more fighting because neither side really trusts the other. And, Running Wolf prompted. And I think you two might actually have a chance, Pete said. You're talking to each other like real people instead of like enemies. That's a good start. Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time since leaving the fort, she began to think this might not be a disaster. Tell me about your people, she said to Running Wolf. What would my life be like? Running Wolf set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. We move with the seasons, following the buffalo herds. In summer, we camp near rivers and streams. In winter, we find shelter in valleys protected from the wind. Do you live in teepees? Catherine asked. Yes, they're easy to take down and move, but warm and comfortable inside. Running Wolf paused. Would that bother you? Not having a permanent house. Catherine thought about her small room at the fort, with its narrow bed and single window. I don't know. I've never lived anywhere else. What do you like to do? Running Wolf asked. What makes you happy? The question caught Catherine off guard. No one had asked her that in years. I like to read, she said, and I like teaching children. Before my mother died, I helped her teach the younger children at the fort. Running Wolf's eyes lit up. You can read well? Yes, my mother taught me when I was small. I've read every book at the fort at least twice. I have books, Running Wolf said. Not many, but some. Father Martinez gave them to me when I left the mission. You really can read? Catherine asked, still not quite believing it. Would you like me to prove it? Running Wolf asked. He stood up and walked over to Pete's shelf of supplies. Pulling down a small book, he opened it and began reading aloud in clear, perfect English. Catherine listened in amazement. Not only could he read, but he read well, with expression and understanding. When he finished the passage, he closed the book and looked at her expectantly. You read better than most of the officers at the fort, she said. Father Martinez was a good teacher, Running Wolf said, sitting back down. He said education was the key to understanding between different peoples. Is that why you wanted to marry someone from the fort? Catherine asked. For understanding? Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. Partly, he said finally, but also because I'm tired of war. Tired of young men dying for land that's big enough to share. Tired of children growing up afraid. Catherine felt a shock of recognition. That's exactly what I told my father. Then we think alike, Running Wolf said. That's a good thing in a marriage. The word marriage sent a flutter through Catherine's stomach. This was really happening. In a few hours, she would be married to this man. This stranger who was beginning to feel less strange with every word he spoke. Are you afraid of me? Running Wolf asked quietly. Catherine considered the question seriously. A little, she admitted, but not the way I thought I would be. How did you think you would be afraid? I thought I would be terrified, Catherine said. I thought you would be cruel and angry. I thought you would treat me like property. And now, Catherine looked into his dark eyes, seeing kindness there alongside strength. Now I think maybe I'm more afraid of disappointing you than of you hurting me. Running Wolf reached across the table and gently touched her hand. His skin was warm and rough from years of outdoor work, but his touch was gentle. Catherine Mayfield, he said softly, I don't think you could disappoint me if you tried. I cannot marry a man I met 3 hours ago. Catherine's voice cracked as she paced back and forth in the small back room of the trading post. The wedding ceremony was supposed to start at sunset, and the orange glow outside the single window told her that time was almost here. Her hands shook as she tried to fix her hair in the cracked mirror Pete Sullivan had given her to use. Nothing looked right. Her face was too pale, her eyes too wide with panic that had suddenly crashed over her like a wave. Miss Catherine, Captain Morrison's voice came through the door. Are you all right in there? No, I am not all right, she called back. This is crazy. I must have lost my mind. She heard whispered voices outside her door. Through the thin walls, she could also hear the sounds of people gathering for the ceremony. Horses snorting, men talking in both English and Comanche, the clink of metal and leather. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Catherine, it was Running Wolf's voice, gentle but concerned. You shouldn't be here, she said through the door. It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. That's a white tradition, Running Wolf said. My people believe that husband and wife should never hide from each other, especially when one is troubled. Catherine pressed her forehead against the cool wooden door. I don't know if I can do this. May I come in? Catherine looked at herself in the mirror one more time. Her blue dress was wrinkled from the long wagon ride. Her hair was escaping from its braid, and her face looked like she might faint at any moment. Yes, she said quietly. The door opened and Running Wolf stepped inside, closing it behind him. In the small space, he seemed even taller and stronger than before. But his expression was kind, not demanding. "Talk to me," he said. "What frightens you?" "Everything," Catherine said, then laughed because it sounded so silly. "I'm afraid I won't know how to be a good wife. I'm afraid your people will hate me. I'm afraid I'll never see my father again. I'm afraid you'll regret choosing me." Running Wolf sat down on the room's single chair, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Those are good fears," he said. "Good fears." Catherine stared at him. "How can fears be good?" "Because they show you care," Running Wolf explained. "Someone who felt nothing would not worry about doing well or being accepted. Your fears tell me you have a good heart." Catherine felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. "But what if I disappoint everyone? What if this doesn't work?" "Then we try again," Running Wolf said simply. "Catherine, this marriage isn't just about you and me. It's about building a bridge between our peoples. Bridges sometimes need to be built more than once before they hold. What if your people don't want a white woman in their tribe?" Running Wolf was quiet for a moment. "Some will welcome you. Some will need time to trust you. A few may never accept you. But you know what? What? The same would be true if you married a white man in your own town. There are always people who resist change." Catherine hadn't thought of it that way. Even at the fort, there were women who gossiped and judged others. Mrs. Henderson had never liked Catherine's family because they came from poor farmers instead of soldiers. Change was hard for everyone. "Tell me honestly," Catherine said. "Do you want to marry me? Or do you just want to make peace?" Running Wolf stood up and walked closer to her. "When Captain Morrison's message came saying Colonel Mayfield had a daughter who might come, I expected to meet someone who was doing her duty. Someone bitter and afraid. And instead I met a young woman who asked me questions about books and education, who worried about disappointing me rather than demanding to know what I would give her, who looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster from stories." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "So you do want to marry me?" "I want to marry the woman who has been talking with me today," Running Wolf said. "The one who is brave enough to leave everything she knows to try something new. The one who cares enough to be afraid of doing it wrong." Outside, someone called Running Wolf's name in Comanche. He answered back in the same language, then turned to Catherine. "They're ready for us," he said. "But we don't have to go out there if you're not ready." Catherine took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror one more time. She still looked scared, but maybe that was okay. Maybe brave people were supposed to look scared sometimes. "Will you tell me what the ceremony means?" she asked. "In your tradition, I mean." Running Wolf smiled. "We will sit in a circle with witnesses from both our peoples. I will give you gifts that show I can provide for you a horse, blankets, jewelry. You will give me something that shows you choose to join my family." "I don't have anything to give you," Catherine said, panic rising again. "What about your mother's locket?" Running Wolf asked, pointing to the silver chain around her neck. Catherine's hand flew to the locket. "How did you know it was my mother's?" "You touch it when you're nervous," Running Wolf said. "The way someone touches something precious. And it's old enough to be passed down." Catherine opened the locket, revealing a tiny painting of her parents on their wedding day. Her mother looked so young and happy, her father proud and strong. "It's all I have left of her," Catherine whispered. "Then it's perfect," Running Wolf said. "You're not giving it away forever. You're sharing it with me, the way married people share everything important." Catherine nodded slowly. The idea of sharing instead of losing made it easier. "After the gifts, we will speak vows," Running Wolf continued. "Then we will eat together from the same bowl, drink from the same cup. This shows that we will share our lives. And then we will be married," Running Wolf said. "In the eyes of both our peoples." Catherine walked to the window and looked out at the group waiting for them. She could see Captain Morrison looking worried, Pete Sullivan setting up torches as the sun got lower, and a group of Comanche warriors she didn't recognize. "Are you ready?" Running Wolf asked. Catherine thought about her father back at the fort, probably pacing and worrying. She thought about her mother, who had married for love and never regretted it. She thought about all the people, white and Comanche, who might live in peace if this worked. "I'm ready," she said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. The ceremony began with smoke and firelight dancing across serious faces. Catherine sat on a blanket beside Running Wolf, surrounded by a circle of witnesses from both worlds. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon, leaving them under a sky full of stars. An elderly Comanche man with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes stood up first. He spoke in his native language, his voice rising and falling like music. Catherine couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the importance in his tone. "He is asking the spirits to bless our union," Running Wolf whispered to her. "He says that bringing two peoples together through marriage has been done since the beginning of time." Catherine nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. The old man's words seemed to go on forever, but there was something peaceful about the rhythm of his voice mixed with the crackling of the fire. When the elder finished speaking, Captain Morrison stood up. "I speak for Colonel Mayfield and all the people of Fort Clearwater," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We give Catherine Mayfield to this marriage freely, with hopes for peace between our peoples." "Not giving," Running Wolf said quietly but firmly. "Catherine chooses for herself." Captain Morrison looked surprised, then nodded. "Catherine Mayfield chooses this marriage freely," he corrected himself. Catherine felt a flutter of gratitude. Even in this strange ceremony, Running Wolf was making sure everyone knew she had a choice. Now came the part she was most nervous about: the exchange of gifts. Running Wolf stood up gracefully and walked to where his men waited with horses. He returned leading a beautiful painted mare with a black and white coat that gleamed in the firelight. "This mare is called Wind Dancer," he said, handing Catherine the rope. "She is fast and smart and loyal. I give her to you as a promise that you will never be trapped or unable to travel where you need to go." Catherine had never owned a horse before. At the fort, she had ridden the army horses sometimes, but always with supervision. This horse was hers completely. "She's beautiful," Catherine said, stroking the mare's soft nose. Wind Dancer waffled gently and didn't shy away from her touch. Next, Running Wolf presented her with a stack of blankets woven in bright colors: red, blue, yellow, and green patterns that seemed to dance in the firelight. "These were made by my sister and my aunt," he said. "They will keep you warm and remind you that you have family among my people." Catherine ran her fingers over the soft wool, amazed by the intricate patterns. She had never owned anything so beautiful. The final gift was a necklace made of silver and turquoise stones. When Running Wolf placed it around her neck, the cool metal settled against her skin like it belonged there. "Now I give you my gift," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. With shaking fingers, she unclasped her mother's locket and held it out to Running Wolf. He took it gently, opening it to see the tiny paintings inside. "Tell me about them," he said. "That's my mother and father on their wedding day," Catherine said. "Mama was 18, younger than I am now. Papa was a new officer, fresh from the academy. They barely knew each other, but they chose to trust each other anyway." "Like us," Running Wolf said. "Like us," Catherine agreed. Running Wolf closed the locket carefully and hung it around his own neck. "I will carry their blessing with us," he said. Pete Sullivan stood up next, holding a leather-bound book. "I ain't much for speeches," he said, "but I've been trading with folks from all walks of life for 15 years. I can tell when people are being honest with each other, and I can tell when they're putting on an act." He looked directly at Catherine and Running Wolf. "You two are being honest. That gives this old trader hope that maybe we can all learn to get along better." He opened the book to a marked page. "I'm what you might call an unofficial preacher out here. Been marrying folks and burying folks as needed. So I'll ask you both the same question. Do you choose each other freely, knowing that marriage means putting someone else's happiness as important as your own?" "I do," Running Wolf said clearly. Catherine's throat felt dry. This was the moment that would change everything. Once she said these words, there would be no going back. "I do," she said, and her voice carried farther than she expected. Pete smiled. Then by the power given to me by necessity and witnessed by folks from 2 different peoples, I pronounce you husband and wife. The Comanche elder stepped forward with a clay bowl filled with what looked like cornmeal mixed with honey. He offered it first to Running Wolf, who took a small handful and ate it, then to Catherine. The mixture was sweet and gritty, but not unpleasant. As she swallowed, Catherine realized she had just participated in a tradition that was probably older than her entire country. A clay cup of water came next, passed between them in the same way. The water was cool and clear, and Catherine felt it wash away the last of her doubt. "It is finished," the elder said in accented English. "You are one people now." The circle of witnesses began to break up, people moving closer to offer congratulations and good wishes. Captain Morrison shook Running Wolf's hand and kissed Catherine's cheek. "Your father would be proud," he whispered to her. "You did something brave today." Catherine looked around at the faces surrounding her, some white, some Comanche, all looking hopeful. For the first time in days, she felt like she had done the right thing. Running Wolf appeared beside her, offering his arm. "Are you ready to meet your new family?" he asked. As they walked toward the group of Comanche warriors, Catherine realized she wasn't scared anymore. She was curious, excited even. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The stars overhead seemed brighter than she had ever seen them, as if they were celebrating too. The Comanche camp rose from the prairie like a flower made of buffalo hide and painted poles. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as they crested the hill and saw dozens of teepees arranged in careful circles. Smoke drifting up from cooking fires, children running between the lodges with dogs barking at their heels. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said to Running Wolf, who rode beside her on his black stallion while she sat carefully on Wind Dancer's back. "We are many families traveling together for the winter hunt," Running Wolf explained. "In spring, some will go different directions, but now we stay close for protection and company." Catherine tried to count the teepees but kept losing track. There had to be at least 60, maybe more. That meant hundreds of people, far more than lived at Fort Clearwater. Her stomach fluttered with nervousness as she realized how many new faces she would need to learn. As they rode closer, people began emerging from the teepees to watch them arrive. Catherine saw women in beautifully decorated dresses, their long black hair braided with feathers and beads. Warriors stood with their arms crossed, studying her with careful eyes. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts, giggling and pointing. "They're all staring at me," Catherine whispered. "Of course they are," Running Wolf said with gentle humor. "You're the first white woman most of them have ever seen up close. And you're their new chief's wife. That makes you very interesting." A young woman broke away from one of the groups and ran toward them, her face bright with excitement. She had the same dark eyes as Running Wolf and moved with the same graceful confidence. "Brother," she called out in English, then switched to rapid Comanche that Catherine couldn't follow. "Catherine," Running Wolf said, "this is my sister, Bright Moon. She's been very curious about you." Bright Moon looked about Catherine's age, maybe a year or 2 older. Her dress was made of soft deerskin decorated with tiny shells and colorful beads that caught the afternoon sunlight. Her smile was warm and genuine. "Welcome, sister," Bright Moon said in careful English. "I have been preparing for your coming." "Preparing how?" Catherine asked, sliding down from Wind Dancer's back with less grace than she would have liked. "I have been learning more English words," Bright Moon said proudly. "And I have made our lodge ready for a new wife." Our lodge. The words hit Catherine like a splash of cold water. She would be sharing a home with Running Wolf. Actually living with him, sleeping in the same space, sharing meals and conversations and everything. "Don't look so scared," Bright Moon said with a laugh. "He snores, but not too loudly." Despite her nervousness, Catherine found herself smiling. Good to know. As they walked through the camp, Catherine noticed how organized everything was. The teepees weren't just scattered randomly. They were arranged in family groups with larger spaces for community gatherings. Children played in designated areas where adults could easily watch them. Horses grazed in a meadow beyond the camp, guarded by young men on horseback. It's like a town, Catherine said, impressed. A town that can pack up and move in 2 hours, Running Wolf said with pride. My people have been perfecting this way of life for generations. They stopped in front of a teepee that was larger than most of the others, decorated with painted symbols that Catherine didn't recognize. The buffalo hide covering looked new, and colorful ribbons hung from the entrance flap. Your new home, Bright Moon announced. Catherine stared at the dwelling that would replace her small room at the fort. It looked so different, so foreign. How would she learn to live in such a place? An elderly woman approached them, walking slowly but with dignity. Her gray hair was braided with silver ornaments, and her weathered face showed both wisdom and kindness. This is Grandmother Singing Bird, Running Wolf said respectfully. She is the eldest woman in our band and very wise. Her blessing means much to our people. Grandmother Singing Bird studied Catherine for a long moment, her dark eyes seeming to look right through her. Then she spoke in Comanche, her voice soft but clear. She says you have good eyes, Bright Moon translated. Eyes that see truly, not just what you expect to see. She says this is important for a chief's wife. Tell her I'm honored to meet her, Catherine said. When Bright Moon translated, the old woman smiled and reached out to touch Catherine's face gently. She spoke again. She says you will need to learn our ways quickly, Bright Moon said. Winter is coming, and everyone must know their place and duties. But she says you look strong enough to learn. Catherine felt a mix of pride and worry. She wanted to prove herself worthy of these people's acceptance, but she had no idea how to live the way they did. Come, Bright Moon said, taking Catherine's arm. I will show you inside the lodge and explain things. The men can talk outside. Catherine followed Bright Moon through the entrance flap and stopped in amazement. The inside of the teepee was nothing like she had expected. Colorful rugs covered the ground, and beautiful decorated bags hung from the poles. There was a fire pit in the center with stones arranged around it, and sleeping areas were marked off with more rugs and blankets. It's beautiful, Catherine said honestly. Bright Moon worked very hard, said another voice. Catherine turned to see a woman about her mother's age, with kind eyes and graying hair. I am Summer Rain, Bright Moon's mother. Welcome to our family. Thank you, Catherine said, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness she was receiving. Sit, Summer Rain said, gesturing to a soft buffalo robe near the fire. We have much to teach you before the sun sets. As Catherine settled onto the robe, she realized that her new life was beginning right now. No more time for wondering or worrying. She was here, and she needed to learn fast. First lesson, Bright Moon said, settling beside her. How to keep the fire burning without filling the lodge with smoke. Catherine watched carefully as Bright Moon demonstrated how to arrange the wood and adjust the smoke flaps at the top of the teepee. It was more complicated than it looked, requiring attention to wind direction and the type of wood being used. Your turn, Summer Rain said. Catherine tried to copy what she had seen, but her fire started producing thick smoke that made her eyes water. Bright Moon quickly adjusted the wood, and the smoke cleared. It takes practice, Bright Moon said kindly. I remember when I first learned. I smoked out half the camp. Outside, Catherine could hear Running Wolf's voice as he spoke with other men. The sound was reassuring, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone in this strange new world. Tell me about the other women, Catherine said. Will they accept me? Summer Rain and Bright Moon exchanged glances. Some will welcome you immediately, Summer Rain said honestly. Some will wait to see what kind of person you prove to be. And some will never like you because you are white, Bright Moon finished. But that is their loss, not yours. Catherine nodded. She had expected this. Even at the fort, not everyone had liked everyone else. The important thing, Summer Rain continued, is to show respect for our ways and to work hard for the good of the band. If you do this, most people will accept you in time. What kind of work? Catherine asked. Cooking, sewing, gathering plants for medicine and food, helping with the children, Bright Moon listed. In winter, there is much indoor work, making clothes, tools, preparing for spring. Catherine thought about her life at the fort, where her main duties had been helping her father with paperwork and occasionally teaching children to read. This would be very different. "I want to learn," she said firmly. "I want to be useful." Summer Rain smiled. "Good. We will start tomorrow with cooking. Tonight, you rest and get used to your new home." As if summoned by her words, Running Wolf's voice called from outside the lodge. "Catherine, may I come in?" "Yes," she called back, her heart beating faster. Running Wolf entered, ducking slightly to fit through the entrance. In the confined space of the teepee, he seemed even taller and more imposing than before. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling onto a buffalo robe across the fire from her. "Overwhelmed," Catherine admitted. "But everyone has been very kind." "Good," Running Wolf said. "Tomorrow will be easier. You'll start to feel more at home." Catherine hoped he was right. As the fire crackled between them and the sounds of the camp settled into evening quiet, she realized that her old life was truly over. Whatever happened next, she was Catherine Running Wolf now, member of a Comanche band, wife of a chief. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. Dawn came too early with the sound of horses thundering past the teepee and men shouting in urgent voices. Catherine jerked awake from restless sleep, her heart hammering as she tried to remember where she was and why everything felt wrong. Raiders! Running Wolf was on his feet instantly, reaching for weapons Catherine hadn't noticed hanging on the teepee poles. Mexican bandits, from the south. Catherine scrambled to her feet, still wearing the dress she had slept in. Through the buffalo hide walls, she could hear chaos erupting, women calling to children, men barking orders, horses neighing in fear or excitement. "What do I do?" Catherine asked, fighting down panic. "Stay with the women and children," Running Wolf commanded, strapping on a knife belt and grabbing a rifle. "Bright Moon knows what to do." Before Catherine could ask any more questions, he was gone, ducking through the entrance and vanishing into the confusion outside. Bright Moon burst into the teepee seconds later, her face grim but determined. "Come, sister. We must help protect the little ones." Catherine followed Bright Moon outside and gasped at what she saw. The peaceful camp had transformed into organized chaos. Warriors were mounting horses and riding toward the southern edge of the camp where dust clouds marked the approaching raiders. Women were gathering children and herding them toward a rocky outcrop that offered natural protection. "How many?" Catherine shouted over the noise. "Maybe 20 riders," Bright Moon called back, pushing a crying toddler toward safety. "They think we are easy prey because our warriors are supposed to be away hunting." "But the warriors are here," Catherine said, confused. "Yes." Bright Moon flashed a fierce grin. "The raiders don't know Running Wolf brought everyone back early for your wedding. They are about to get a big surprise." Catherine found herself swept along with a group of women and children toward the rocks. Her mind struggled to process what was happening. Yesterday she had been worried about learning to tend fires. Today she was hiding from armed bandits who wanted to kill or capture everyone in the camp. "Catherine!" She turned to see Summer Rain struggling with an armload of supplies while trying to keep track of 3 small children. Without thinking, Catherine ran to help, scooping up the smallest child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. "Thank you," Summer Rain gasped. "Take her to the rocks. I will bring the others." The little girl wrapped her arms around Catherine's neck and buried her face in her shoulder. Catherine could feel her trembling with fear, and suddenly her own terror transformed into fierce protectiveness. This child needed her to be brave. At the rocky shelter, Catherine found herself surrounded by 24 women and twice as many children. The older women moved with calm efficiency, organizing everyone into defensive positions and keeping the children quiet. The younger women watched the southern horizon where sounds of fighting were getting louder. "There!" Bright Moon pointed toward a rise in the land. "You can see them now." Catherine squinted and made out a group of riders racing toward the camp. Even from a distance, she could tell these weren't Comanche warriors. Their clothes were different, their horses smaller, and something about the way they rode spoke of desperate men doing desperate things. "Why are they attacking?" Catherine asked. "For horses and captives," said an older woman whose English was heavily accented. Mexican bandits cannot make honest living, so they steal from Indians and sell what they take. The little girl in Catherine's arms whimpered, and Catherine found herself humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. It seemed to help. The child's grip loosened slightly, and her breathing became more regular. Suddenly, gunshots rang out much closer than before. Several women cried out, and everyone pressed farther back into the rocks. "The raiders broke through our first line," Bright Moon said, her face pale but determined. "Some of them are in the camp now." Catherine's stomach dropped. "What about Running Wolf?" "He will be fighting," Bright Moon said simply. "It is what chiefs do." More gunshots, and then Catherine heard something that made her blood freeze, men shouting in Spanish, much too close to their hiding place. "They've found us," whispered one of the women. Catherine looked around at the faces surrounding her, women and children who had welcomed her, who had made her feel like family. The thought of these bandits hurting any of them filled her with rage she didn't know she possessed. "How many guns do we have?" she asked quietly. The women looked at her in surprise. "Guns?" Bright Moon asked. "For protection," Catherine said. "In case they try to take the children." Summer Rain reached into her supply bundle and pulled out an old pistol. "This is all we have." Catherine had learned to shoot at the fort. Her father had insisted on it after her mother died. "Give it to me," she said, holding out her hand. "You know how to use this?" Summer Rain asked, surprised. "Yes," Catherine said, checking to make sure the gun was loaded. "My father taught me." The Spanish voices were getting closer. Through gaps in the rocks, Catherine could see 3 men on horseback searching the area around their hiding place. "Everyone stay quiet," Catherine whispered, positioning herself where she could see the entrance to their rocky shelter. The waiting was the worst part. Catherine's hands shook as she held the pistol, and the little girl in her other arm seemed to sense the danger, pressing closer against her chest. Then one of the raiders dismounted and started walking directly toward their hiding place, his rifle ready. He was young, maybe 20, with a scraggly beard and clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks. Catherine took a deep breath and stepped into view. "Stop right there," she said in Spanish, pointing the pistol at the raider's chest. The young man's eyes widened in shock. He obviously hadn't expected to find a white woman among the Comanche, especially one holding a gun with steady hands. "Drop your weapon," Catherine continued in Spanish, grateful for the lessons Father Martinez had given to all the children at the fort. For a moment, the raider hesitated. Catherine could see him calculating whether he could bring his rifle up before she could pull the trigger. "I said drop it," Catherine repeated, her voice harder. The raider's rifle clattered to the ground. "Now call your friends and tell them to leave," Catherine ordered. But before the young man could speak, a shot rang out behind Catherine. She spun around to see Running Wolf on horseback, smoke rising from his rifle barrel. The other 2 raiders were fleeing, one clutching a wounded arm. Running Wolf rode up to where Catherine stood, his eyes moving from her to the captured raider to the women and children crowding behind her. "Are you hurt?" he asked her. "No," Catherine said, lowering the pistol but keeping it ready. "Is the fighting over?" "For now," Running Wolf said. "We drove them off, but they may try again." He looked at Catherine with something that might have been pride. "You protected my people." "Our people," Catherine corrected quietly. Running Wolf smiled, and Catherine realized that something had changed between them. She was no longer just the white woman he had married for peace. She was someone who had proven herself when it mattered most. The little girl in her arms looked up at Catherine with big dark eyes and said something in Comanche that made all the women laugh. "What did she say?" Catherine asked. "She said you are a fierce mother bear," Bright Moon translated, grinning. "She wants to know if you will protect her always." Catherine looked down at the trusting face and felt her heart swell with unexpected love. "Tell her yes," she said. "Tell her I will always protect her." As the women and children began emerging from their rocky shelter, Catherine realized she had found something she never expected to find among the Comanche, a purpose that went beyond just keeping peace between peoples. She had found a family worth fighting for. You cannot expect us to follow a white woman's ideas about how to survive winter. Stone Bear's voice cut through the evening air like a blade as he stood before the council fire. His weathered face twisted with anger and disgust. Catherine felt every eye in the circle turn toward her. 3 weeks had passed since the raider attack, and she had thought she was beginning to find her place among Running Wolf's people. Now, sitting beside her husband in the council meeting, she realized how fragile her acceptance really was. She knows nothing of our ways, Stone Bear continued, gesturing dismissively in Catherine's direction. Yet she dares to suggest we change traditions that have kept us alive for generations. Running Wolf's jaw tightened, but he remained seated. Catherine knew he was letting the challenge play out according to Comanche custom. Everyone had the right to speak their mind in council. What exactly did I suggest? Catherine asked, keeping her voice calm despite the anger building in her chest. Stone Bear turned to face her directly. You told the women we should store grain like white settlers do. You said we should build permanent shelters for winter instead of following the buffalo herd south. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had made those suggestions during a conversation with the women about preparing for the harsh winter everyone said was coming. She hadn't realized her words would be seen as criticism of Comanche ways. I was only trying to help, Catherine said. Where I come from, storing extra food saves lives when hunting is poor. Where you come from? Stone Bear repeated mockingly. People huddle in wooden boxes and eat the same tasteless food every day. They have forgotten how to live with the land instead of fighting against it. Murmurs rippled around the circle. Catherine could see some people nodding in agreement with Stone Bear, while others looked uncomfortable with his harsh words. Grandmother Singing Bird raised her hand for attention. When the circle fell silent, she spoke in Comanche, her voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom. She says both ways of thinking have value. Bright Moon translated quietly for Catherine. She says wisdom comes from listening to new ideas, not from refusing to hear them. Stone Bear scowled. Grandmother, with respect, this woman has been among us less than a moon. How can she understand what we need? Perhaps because she sees with fresh eyes, said a voice from across the fire. Catherine looked up in surprise to see Grey Wolf, one of the younger warriors, speaking in her defense. During the raid, she protected our children when she could have run away, Grey Wolf continued. She proved her courage. Maybe we should listen to her ideas about survival too. Courage in battle is different from wisdom about living. Stone Bear shot back. A wolf may be brave, but you don't let it lead your horse herd. Catherine felt something snap inside her. She stood up, ignoring Running Wolf's warning hand on her arm. You're right, she said, her voice carrying clearly around the circle. I have been here less than a month. I don't know all your customs or understand all your traditions, but I do know something about surviving hard times. The circle fell completely silent. Even Stone Bear looked surprised by her boldness. When I was 12, my mother died of fever, Catherine continued. My father and I had to learn to take care of ourselves without her. We tried doing everything exactly the way she had done it, because we thought that was the right way to honor her memory. Catherine paused, remembering those difficult months after her mother's death. But you know what we discovered? Some of her ways worked perfectly for us. Others didn't work at all. We had to keep the good ideas and find new solutions for the problems we couldn't solve the old way. She looked directly at Stone Bear. I'm not suggesting you abandon your traditions. I'm suggesting you might add to them. Take the best of what you know and combine it with useful ideas from other places. Stone Bear's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained skeptical. And what makes you think your white ways are useful to us? Because I've seen both worlds now, Catherine said. I've seen white settlers starve because they were too proud to learn from Indians about which plants are safe to eat. And I've heard stories of Indian bands suffering through hard winters because they wouldn't consider new ways of storing food. She sat back down, her heart pounding. She had probably just made Stone Bear an enemy for life, but she couldn't let him dismiss her ideas without a fair hearing. Running Wolf stood up slowly. My wife speaks wisely, he said, his voice carrying the authority of leadership. Our people have always been strong because we adapt. When horses came, we learned to use them. When guns came, we learned to use them too. Useful ideas have no color. Horses and guns are tools, Stone Bear argued. This is about changing the way we live. Is it? Running Wolf asked. Catherine suggested storing extra corn and dried meat in case hunting is poor. How is that different from what we already do when we dry buffalo meat for travel? Stone Bear had no immediate answer to that. Summer Rain spoke up from her place in the women's section of the circle. I have been watching Catherine learn our ways. She asks good questions, not to criticize but to understand. Maybe we should ask her good questions too, to understand her ideas better. Catherine felt a surge of gratitude toward Running Wolf's aunt. Summer Rain had become like a mother to her over the past weeks, patient and kind as she taught Catherine countless skills needed for life in a Comanche band. What questions do you have? Catherine asked Summer Rain. You spoke of storing grain. Where would we store it? How would we carry it when we move camp? How would we keep it safe from insects and mice? These were practical questions, the kind Catherine could answer. She had been thinking about these problems since making her original suggestion. Small amounts could be stored in specially treated skin bags, Catherine said, buried in different locations along your usual travel routes, marked so you could find them again when needed. And if another band found the caches first? Gray Wolf asked. You could mark them in a way that shows which band made them, Catherine suggested. Other Comanche would respect the markers. Enemies who didn't understand the marks probably wouldn't recognize them as food caches. The idea seemed to intrigue several people. Catherine could see them thinking it through, considering possibilities. It has merit, admitted an older warrior Catherine didn't know well. There have been winters when the buffalo moved farther south than usual. Extra food caches might have saved lives. Stone Bear looked around the circle, seeing that opinion was shifting away from him. You would risk our people's lives on the untested ideas of a white woman? I would risk our people's lives by refusing to consider any idea that might help them survive, Running Wolf said firmly. Whether that idea comes from a white woman, a Mexican trader, or a vision dream. The debate continued for another hour, but Catherine could tell the moment had passed when she might have been rejected completely. Stone Bear would probably never like or trust her, but the majority of the council seemed willing to give her ideas a fair hearing. When the council finally ended, people began drifting away to their teepees. Catherine sat by the dying fire, emotionally drained by the confrontation. You did well, Running Wolf said, settling beside her. I made an enemy tonight, Catherine said. You already had that enemy? Running Wolf replied. Stone Bear has opposed you since the day you arrived. Tonight you showed everyone else that you have both courage and wisdom. Catherine leaned against her husband's shoulder, grateful for his support. Will this get easier? Some things will, Running Wolf said. Others will always be difficult. That's the price of being different, of bringing change. But Catherine, yes, change is how people grow stronger. You're helping my people grow stronger, whether Stone Bear sees it or not. As they walked back to their teepee under a sky full of stars, Catherine realized she had passed another test. Not the test of fighting raiders or learning to tend fires, but the harder test of standing up for her ideas in the face of opposition. She was becoming truly Comanche now, not by abandoning who she had been, but by adding her own strength to the strength of her new people. The soldiers are back. Little Fox came running into the women's work circle, his 8-year-old voice high with excitement and fear. Catherine's stomach dropped as she looked up from the moccasins she was learning to sew with intricate beadwork. It had been 2 months since her wedding, and she had begun to hope that her old world would stay separate from her new one. But now, as women around the circle began murmuring nervously, Catherine realized that hope had been foolish. How many soldiers? Bright Moon asked, setting down her quill work with steady hands despite the worry in her eyes. 10, maybe 12, Little Fox panted. They have a white flag, but they also have many guns. Catherine's hands shook as she put aside her sewing. A white flag meant they wanted to talk, not fight. But why were they here? Had something gone wrong at the fort? Was her father hurt? Where is Running Wolf? She asked. With the other men going to meet them, Little Fox said. Catherine stood up quickly, smoothing her deerskin dress and checking that her hair was properly braided. She had learned to dress like a Comanche woman, but she wondered if the soldiers would even recognize her now. I should go too, she said. No, Summer Rain said firmly. Let the men handle this first. If they need you, they will call. But Catherine couldn't sit still. She found herself pacing around the edge of the camp, trying to catch glimpses of the meeting happening near the southern edge of their territory. Other women and children gathered in small groups, whispering about what the soldiers might want. Finally, Bright Moon appeared beside her. Come, she said quietly. Running Wolf wants to see you. Catherine's heart hammered as she followed Bright Moon toward a group of men standing in tense conversation. She could see the soldiers now, a dozen blue-uniformed figures on horseback, their leader holding a white flag as promised. When she got closer, Catherine's breath caught. The leader was Captain Morrison, looking older and more tired than she remembered. Behind him rode Lieutenant Barnes, the hot-headed young officer who had wanted to rescue her from Running Wolf months ago. Catherine, Running Wolf said as she approached. They say they have a message from your father. Captain Morrison dismounted and walked toward her, his face a mixture of relief and concern. Miss Catherine, he said formally, you look different. Catherine was suddenly aware of how she must appear to him. Her skin was darker from months of outdoor work, her hair was braided with colored ribbons in the Comanche style, and her clothes were deerskin and beadwork instead of cotton and lace. I am different, she said simply. What message do you bring from my father? Captain Morrison pulled a folded letter from his uniform pocket. He wanted me to give you this personally, and to see for myself that you are well. Catherine took the letter with hands that trembled slightly. Her father's familiar handwriting on the outside made her throat tight with sudden homesickness. Am I allowed to read this privately? She asked Running Wolf. Of course, her husband said. But stay where we can see you. I don't trust their true intentions yet. Catherine walked a few steps away and opened the letter. Her father's words seemed to jump off the page. My dearest Catherine, I think of you every day and wonder if I made the right choice in letting you go. Captain Morrison tells me there have been no raids since your marriage, so perhaps your sacrifice was not in vain. But I need to know that you are truly safe and not just held captive. If you want to come home, we will find a way. If you choose to stay, I will try to understand. Your loving father. Catherine read the letter twice, feeling pulled in two directions. Part of her longed to see her father again, to sleep in her old bed and eat familiar food. But a larger part of her knew that she belonged here now, with Running Wolf and Bright Moon and Summer Rain and all the others who had become her family. She folded the letter carefully and walked back to the group of waiting men. What does he say? Running Wolf asked gently. He wants to know if I'm here by choice or by force, Catherine said. He's offering to take me home if I want to go. Lieutenant Barnes spoke up for the first time. Miss Mayfield, you don't have to stay with these savages. We can protect you. Catherine felt anger flare in her chest. These people are not savages, Lieutenant. They are my family now. Family? Barnes looked shocked. Catherine, they've clearly done something to your mind. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have, Catherine said firmly. She turned to Captain Morrison. Please tell my father that I am here by my own choice. I am safe, I am happy, and I am exactly where I belong. Are you certain? Captain Morrison asked. You could come back to the fort just for a visit. See your father. Reassure him personally. Catherine looked at Running Wolf, seeing understanding in his dark eyes. He would support whatever choice she made, even if it hurt him. If I went back for a visit, Catherine said slowly, would I be allowed to return here? The soldiers exchanged glances. That would depend, Captain Morrison said carefully. Depend on what? On whether your father felt you were safe coming back. Catherine understood. Once she was back at the fort, they would find reasons to keep her there. Her father's fear and love would override his respect for her choices. "Then I cannot visit," Catherine said. "This is my home now. These are my people. Please tell my father that I love him, but I will not abandon the life I have built here." Lieutenant Barnes's face flushed red. "You can't be serious. You'd rather live like a savage than return to civilization." "I'd rather live free to make my own choices than be protected from them," Catherine replied. Running Wolf stepped closer to her, not threateningly, but in clear support. "My wife has spoken her mind freely," he said to the soldiers. "Will you honor her choice?" Captain Morrison looked tired and sad. "I'll deliver your message, Catherine, but I hope you know what you're giving up." "I know exactly what I'm choosing," Catherine said. "I'm choosing love over fear, growth over safety, and trust over suspicion." As the soldiers prepared to leave, Captain Morrison pulled out a small package. "This is from your father," he said. "Some things he thought you might want." Catherine opened the package to find a small portrait of her parents, a book of poetry her mother had loved, and a letter of credit at the bank in San Antonio. "Tell him thank you," Catherine said, tears threatening. "Tell him I will treasure these gifts." After the soldiers rode away, Catherine stood with Running Wolf watching them disappear into the distance. She felt like she was watching her old life fade away forever. "Do you regret your choice?" Running Wolf asked quietly. Catherine thought about the question seriously. Did she regret giving up afternoon tea and clean beds and familiar faces? Did she regret trading the safety of fort walls for the freedom of the plains? "No," she said finally. "I regret that I can't have both worlds. But if I must choose one, I choose this one." Running Wolf smiled and took her hand. "Then we will make this world the best it can be, together." As they walked back toward camp, Catherine realized that she had just severed the last thread connecting her to her former life. She was fully committed now to being Catherine Running Wolf, Comanche woman, wife of a chief. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. There was no going back now. There was only moving forward into whatever future she and Running Wolf would build together. Behind them, the dust cloud from the soldiers' departure settled back to earth, leaving no trace of their visit except the precious gifts in Catherine's hands and the knowledge that she had chosen her path with her eyes wide open.